Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a couple of my European nightcrawler worm bins. And what they're getting today is a little out of the ordinary. I mean, I do sometimes dispose of old bread, give it to the worms here and there, but here I got a pretty good amount of it and even a couple little buttery pastries here. I got some old coffee too. So this is really going to be their feeding today. So let me get the systems up on the bench and we'll get to work. Well, let me bring you over there. I'll show you which ones we're talking about. And I've got some info about them too. They're the ones right down here, and they're 240 days of age today. 13 days have passed since we last checked in on these little guys. And at that time, they had gotten feeding number 21. The bread and coffee is going to be feeding number 22. So I'm going to get a glove on. We're going to get these systems up on the bench, and we're going to get them fed. So let's get to work. The last time we fed, which at this point, remember, it was almost 2 weeks ago, they got a type of food that I believe is going to go pretty quick. It was the leaves of some bunches of radishes. And those leaves, especially when they get frozen first, the way these were, that got fed here, they just go really quick. And we laid that stuff down into a little bed of newspaper down here in the feeding zone. I think each system got half of a lemon too. So I do see out here on the surface little chunks of residual paper, newspaper. I wonder if that's some of the newspaper that we buried the feeding with. Let's excavate down into the feeding zone and see what we see. I do also see a lot of little white spots everywhere, which are basically springtails all over the place. Now, I do remember we also made a collection of older foods that we encountered along the way, kind of like this little piece of corn cob that I just found. We included that with the foods. So while I doubt that any radish leftovers are still going to be in here, maybe we'll see half of a lemon. I wouldn't be surprised about that. Even if we don't see it, I'm sure we'll at least smell it. At least I know I will. There's going to be definitely a little hint of citrus coming out of here. I'm sure of it anytime now. So now, with this bread, you know, the one thing I really wanted to make sure was that the stuff is soaked through and through. Not because it was hard and brittle or whatever, but because it seems like if bread doesn't first get soaked, then the worms will hardly be able to touch it at all. It'll just sort of sit there. It might develop a ton of mold, but it seems like it'll just never get consumed by the worms. So now I figured instead of just open up a little small feeding zone right down the middle, I thought maybe we would make one that's a little bit more spread out. So I'm just going to disrupt a good bit of the material out here, push some of it out to the edge, and we're going to make a somewhat bigger than normal feeding zone, just to spread the food around a little bit more than normal instead of kind of focusing it. Now, besides the newspaper that was dropped in here right beneath all the foods, that's all the old foods we found as well as the new foods we put in here last time. That stuff, I mean, maybe here and there, a little piece of it is what we're finding here, but... And the other thing was I had a couple coffee filters resting out on top of each system as a feeding zone indicator, and I saw no signs of either of those either. So I was just reminded of that, so I figured I would make mention of it since here it's still undisturbed, and I really don't see any sign of what might be remains of the feeding zone indicator that was resting out here. I mean, this might be... This definitely looks like newspaper because there's some color ink on there, but this also newspaper because of the color ink, but very little of any of it remaining. So let's see how we can... Somehow I tried to cut this one in half as if it would be a sandwich. And there were 4 slices of that stuff as well. So I figured we would take half of it. Oops, this little hitchhiker almost got stuck on the food transport tray. So yeah, the rest of it is going to go to the other system as far as the bread goes. And I've got a little bit of this coffee here, not a whole lot, that's for sure. Oops. I just wanted to save at least half of it for the other system too. And oh yeah, I almost forgot, we got these 2 little, what these things in Hungarian are called is pogacha. Not sure if anyone ever heard of pogacha, but if you did, then you'll know what those are, and they're delicious. So no, that's pretty much it. I mean, we could always go with more bedding, and it does seem like they're craving it because they did away with all the bedding that we placed in with the food last time, the newspaper that went in, but maybe this time we'll just replace the feeding zone indicators. At least they'll have something there. Better than nothing, I guess. just that in a system 240 days of age like this one, it already does seem to me like, you know, it'd be nice to not have any sort of scraps floating around. Although you gotta admit, 13 days to do away with the feeding zone indicators and the newspapers under the food, they definitely did away with that stuff pretty quickly. Perhaps in addition to feeding zone indicators, we should also just lay out some top covering newspaper, and then if they, you know, if they're really in the need for that sort of sustenance, then at least it's there for them, right? So we kind of went all the way from beginning to end in terms of feeding bin number 1 over here. A lot of times we'll kind of excavate both, feed both, cover up both. But today we kind of deviated from the normal, so what the heck, it doesn't matter. This way we'll just have like a little sneak preview as to what to expect in here. Should be very similar to what we just took care of over in bin number 1. Bin number 2, I'm seeing, you know, no real remnants of the stuff we put in last time, the newspaper or the radish leaves, but I definitely see stuff like the middle of a piece of corn cob, that had been cut up into little circular shaped objects like that. So these systems have some of those old slow composting bits of leftovers in here, but I got a feeling that that stuff is going to start vanishing pretty soon too. These systems do seem like they're running pretty low on, definitely low on bedding, but as far as the leftover scraps of food here and there, we might see some, I don't know if that's like maybe the little leftover bit of a stem of a banana or something, just with the fibrous appearance of it. So I think here too we're gonna, you know, I didn't even do a very good job of spreading that bread out. I thought I might crumble it and sort of disperse it a little bit more evenly instead of having it all right down the middle, but I spaced out. So I think just from the perspective of keeping things consistent, we'll just apply the food here in the same way rather than, we'll kind of scrap that whole idea of spreading it out a little bit more. In some of my older systems, I have been doing that. I've been spreading the food all around the system so that there's not like a concentrations of worms work in the middle of the bin, but rather there's worms all over the place, working down all angles. And that was kind of the thinking behind setting it up that way, but I forgot, doesn't matter. Alright, so let's give them their yummy, starchy meal. Whatever little bits of bread soaked off and fell away from the main piece, I'll get in here as well. And there was a little bit of coffee left too, so let's get that over into here for these little guys. And that's pretty much their feeding. So let's see, let's try not to forget anything else now. We want to give them a feeding zone indicator again, right? I think there was definitely a need for one. Otherwise, I don't think they would have touched it. They wouldn't have gobbled it all up. But as the remaining bits of bedding, like carbon-rich materials down within the system, get depleted over time, and it just becomes more and more castings anymore, I would think that they're probably becoming a little bit desperate for this sort of stuff. So instead of just putting these out the way we did last time, I think we'll go one step further. And I'm going to grab, let's see, I had a newspaper here that we can tear in half, and oops, definitely not tearing with the grain there. If we were, it wouldn't have torn that way. So it seems to me like if we rest out a nice big piece of newspaper, perhaps the very edges that don't get well covered by plastic or something, in case they're a little bit dry, they might not get consumed. But I got a feeling by next time these top covering pieces of newspaper will have gotten a whole bunch of attention. So I guess we'll see. We'll see how they look when we get back in here. And this too, I got a funny feeling this is going to be a pretty fast composting meal. Bread, you know, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure what to expect. Sometimes it seems like it goes quick, other times not so quick. So I guess we'll just have to see. All right, everyone. That's it for our check-in with the European night crawlers. I got a few things I got to take care of getting cleaned up here and put away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that because that stuff's boring. Before I go there really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.